Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. Well, not really an episode, but another Malts and Meeples stream. I was actually doing my 10-minute Marvel introduction there. Wrong thing. But today on Malts and Meeples, we are going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons. When I created the introductory video, which is up on youtube.com/maltsandmeeples, I said that I was going to be doing some Dungeons and Dragons stuff on this channel, as well as doing the solo board gaming and now the Kickstarter and the unboxings as well that we've been doing. And with a friend who's now interested in Dungeons and Dragons and looking potentially that he would be the person running his campaign more so than being a player, and just I haven't been able to play recently or run recently, and it's something I've been wanting to get back into. I thought it'd be fun to start doing kind of a video series on drinking in D&D. Just soak it in. But you're getting a weird image here. Just wanted to make sure I'm live. This all looks good. Let's kick over to this. So, what is Drinking in D&D going to be about? What is this series, basically, of videos that I'm going to do over an extended period of time? Probably never finish the series per se, but it will be more and more D&D content to really help you flesh out. Well, I guess that's what it is. It's going to really help you flesh out your knowledge of D&D, as well as kind of learn what D&D is, be able to kind of have this beginning knowledge if you don't have players in your area who are there to teach you themselves. But let's quickly talk about tonight's drink. It's Drinking in D&D. And so we have a cider here from Sociable Cider Werks in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Training wheels, Scrumpy apple. Ugh. I've had this one before. That was loud. It is not my favorite cider that they do. They have a hopped cider that is really good. This one, in some ways, is not quite dry enough for what I like. Like a very dry cider. This is a little bit sweeter, than I normally go with. However, I generally do really like their stuff, and for sweet cider, this is one of the better ones out there. So, we're gonna start at the beginning. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, Gary Gygax sat down. No, that's not right. Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game. That's the first spot to start, which immediately asks a second question: what is a role-playing game? In a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, you're taking on kind of a persona of a character you have created for the game, and with potentially somebody running the game. And in classic systems like Dungeons and Dragons, there's a game master or dungeon master who is running the game, and then all the players bring their input into it, into the story, into the world, into their characters, into the interactions, the combats, the conversations, things like that. And together you create this big story. I have this page up here, which I'm on the new player guide for Dungeons and Dragons, so dndbeyond.com/essentials is the site, And it's kind of giving an overview of what D&D is. I think this is an okay overview. This is, if I were to give someone an elevator pitch for D&D, I wouldn't read off a ton of what's on this site. But it's good. This is for somebody who knows a little bit more than potentially I want to start talking about with. D&D and Dungeons & Dragons role-playing games, they're all generally cooperative storytelling games at the heart of it. There can be this mindset of that it's the dungeon master versus the players, and the players are trying to get one over on the dungeon master, stuff like that. That's not what D&D is. It's not a competitive thing between the two sides. It's cooperative, collaborative storytelling at its heart. And it's very easy, like people think like, okay, maybe D&D, it's a whole bunch of dice. No, D&D isn't rolling dice. Those dice can help inform your decisions or inform whether you succeed or fail, but it's very possible to have a 3-hour session of Dungeons and Dragons, and if you don't have a combat, never even to roll the dice. You can do so many things in D&D with the roleplay, with the interactions of the characters, with the other people in the world, that you can have your epic story be done completely without those dice. Sorry, I gotta adjust. And then there's this idea of kind of combat and combat. I mean, set that aside as one piece. Being a fairly important part of D&D. No, you can have multiple sessions of D&D where you do not have any combat. Yes, it is part of your character, but it's not necessarily something that's going to happen all the time. And it's not necessarily something that is important to having an entertaining game. There are so many different types of stories you can collaboratively create in Dungeons and Dragons, that it's not just the dungeon crawl where you're going through, you're fighting stuff to get to the end, to get the treasure, get out. You're not doing I was doing the save the princess story, or prevent the end of the world from happening. Those are all definitely things that you can do in Dungeons and Dragons, but you could be solving a mystery where you never fight anyone. You might make rules for other things like investigation, perception, intimidation, persuasion, things like that. But you will never throw a punch. And that's D&D as well. D&D is, it's fantasy just because that's what the setting for the game is. There's no reason you have to keep it fantasy. You can change things out in Dungeons and Dragons pretty easily and play a game probably in any setting. And that's the fun of it. It's almost limitless storytelling ability within Dungeons and Dragons in a way that most people aren't able to get otherwise. There are people who will write stuff with other people, and that will be their way to tell a story collaboratively. But that's not most people, and in a lot of ways, it's harder to sit down and write something than it is to sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons, in my opinion. Because in Dungeons and Dragons, there's a whole lot, I would say there's less rules. There's not spelling and grammar and all that stuff that you're going to get tripped up on while writing. Is just simply generating whatever pops into your head and putting it down and saying it, and especially as the players, you have the freedom to almost do that, basically, and the DM has to adjust on the fly. Whereas everybody else would have a little bit more structure in a written thing. Plus, in some ways, it feels like it's more of a creative outlet than writing, which, if you're on nerdologist.com, I write an article every weekday for it, and that is a massive creative outlet for me. I love it. But Dungeons and Dragons is just a different sort of creative outlet that it feels almost safer in my experience. I know there are weird groups out there that are very different than what I would play, but it can be, I'll put it that way, it can be that kind of safer space to be creative and to put something creative out there within a group of friends. And I think that's the important thing, is a group of friends, whether or not you sit down immediately and start your game with a group of friends, or if after a few sessions you are a group of friends, that's really what matters. It's the creative outlet of a group of friends together, building this collaborative story. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that. There are rules that are put in place. There are plenty of different rules, and let's actually open up the store here. There are so many things you can get. You can get the source bundle, and these are all digital. Bundles, legendary bundle, so much you can get. Adventurer bundle, essentials kit, all of these source books that have been released. If you want to play Dungeons and Dragons with your friends and have plenty of content for a long time, there are two things that you need, in my opinion. The first and the most important is this one, the Player's Handbook. This is going to tell you how to create your characters. This is going to give you an idea of what sort of fantasy feel that Dungeons and Dragons is. It's very classical fantasy. But if you're not super familiar with that, the text about the character races, the different classes, the different backgrounds, and so many other things, they're going to be able to tell you the feel without you having to read through anything more. If I'm not mistaken, the Player's Handbook maybe even comes with a monster or two. So theoretically, you could just play with the Player's Handbook. But that's not necessarily going to be enough for a big, epic fantasy story. Because that's one of the things that D&D can do, is it can tell that big, epic story where you start out as zeros and end up as the land's greatest heroes. I mean, that's so often the standard hero's journey. You look at it with Luke Skywalker in 4, 5, and 6 for Star Wars. He's a mechanic for his aunt and uncle on a desert planet as a moisture farmer. that's a nobody. He's nothing special. In the end, he's the one who gets, or he's the reason why Vader throws Palpatine down into the core of the Death Star. And he becomes a strong, albeit still kind of whiny, hero. And so, like in most of the classic adventures, classic stories, it's somebody who's a nobody who becomes a hero. Captain America is a great example of this too. He's just a scrawny, little teenage kid who wants to be able to fight for his country. And keeps on getting told no, getting told no, getting told no. He gets the super soldier serum and becomes a hero. And that's what a really truly epic fantasy story does as well, and what you can do in Dungeons and Dragons. You can take your team of misfits who are more screw-ups than anything, and yeah, they're going to be screw-ups along the way, probably constantly, but in the end, they'll probably do the right thing, and they'll probably be heroes. And most of the time, that's the story that you want to tell. So the player's handbook, and really, okay, let's pretend I didn't say and the player's handbook. Just cut that out in post. There is no post. Yeah, with Dungeons and Dragons, that's really what most people are looking for. And I talk a lot about the story. And the player's handbook, the monster manual, any of the other books out there, those are just guidelines to help you tell those stories. I put it this way. And it's an example from playing D&D. When you ask the players, as a DM running the game, what do you want to do? And they have any option in the world, it's really hard to decide. There are too many options. You could do a role-playing game completely freeform, and there would be too many options. People would freeze because there's too much to choose from, too much to decide on. The player's handbook, the monster manual, those are the things that give you enough structure that everyone in the group is able to collaboratively tell a story together. And which will now take us to the second book that I would say is pretty essential. I would say this is completely essential, actually. These are all the monsters you're going to be fighting. Now, I just finished a few minutes ago saying, you don't have to fight monsters. That's not integral part to D&D, but you're going to do it. There's just something about fantasy heroes fighting against and overcoming extreme odds that it's heroic. It gives you those moments of heroism, those great moments of triumph, overcoming the odds. And the Monster Manual is the book that is going to allow you to do that. And the Player's Handbook and Monster Manual are two of the three core books. I don't consider the third one essential, but I will go and talk about it coming up here in a few minutes. But just kind of a little bit more with the Monster Manual. This also gives you the framework to know how to scale your encounters. Now, the math is a bit weird for it. I will actually, it's this one. So this is the one that I like the best for calculating this out. Like I said, the math is weird. I'm good at math, and that math is weird. So it's a whole lot easier for me to say, well, I have a group of 4 characters, level 8, calculate, I now know how much my XP budget is. They call it a budget. Basically, I know when adding up the experience points from these monsters, how, what sort of range I should be doing my encounters in, my battles in. And something like one monster at 8,400 experience points, it's deadly, but your players will absolutely destroy it. So there's a lot of feel that you have to get with that. I will leave this up here for just a couple of seconds longer. How do you use the calculator? It's nice. It's very simple, straightforward. It's what I like for a calculator for encounters. There are some fancier ones, but most of the time I just want to punch in the number of monsters and the experience points that those monsters give to figure out how many of them I should throw at the players. So, you're able to, basically the point of bringing that up was that you're able to scale, and that's why the monster manual is very important for Dungeons and Dragons. It's going to tell you how many monsters, of how strong, or how many hit points, or how hard to hit you're going to have in an encounter, in a combat. And sometimes you're going to, just go back here, sometimes you're going to have the easy amount. Sometimes you're going to have the hard amount. Sometimes you're going to have the deadly amount, or higher. It's just all dependent on the story you are telling together. So the last book of the kind of the core 3 books is the Dungeon Master's Guide. Everything a dungeon master needs to weave legendary stories for the world's greatest role-playing game. Entertain and inspire your players. So, I mean, that's fairly boastful that they're the world's greatest role-playing game. That is 100% subjective on taste. It's probably the world's most popular role-playing game. Let's put it that way. And I would say this has a lot of great things for a dungeon master. This is a good book brimming with all sorts of information, all sorts of charts that you can roll your dice against to help you generate characters quickly on the fly, for the NPCs, non-player characters, who the player characters, PCs, interact with. But I would say run a small game. 2, 3, 4 sessions, whatever you need to tell a little story, and see how everybody likes it. See how it's going, and then at that point, when you decide you want to continue on or you want to start a new, bigger, longer, larger game, that's when you grab the Dungeon Master's Guide. And you're like, yeah, 4 sessions, that's not too long. That's what, like 2 weeks? Probably 4 months. In all honesty, it's really hard to schedule people. Unless you're a high schooler, which I wish I had been playing this in high school. Would have had a ton of fun with it. But this then adds so much more information. So many more things like magic items that you're able to grab. A lot of things like that I use a little of it. But with the Dungeon Master's Guide, you're able to pick and choose. So those are kind of the 3 essential books. Let's go and kind of talk about how do you put together a D&D game. How do you put together a D&D group? How much work is it for everyone to do it? Because I think that's one of the biggest barriers of entry for a lot of people, is that it seems like a lot of work. And it can be. In what I've run, I tend to run much more by the seat of my pants. I am very improvisational, and because of that, I don't have to plan as much. I can generate story things on the fly when the players say, oh, we want to go and do this. I can create this. And I've leveraged the players for that too. It's like, oh, well, we walk into this bar. Well, I had a plan for that bar to be there until a few minutes ago when you guys asked me if there was a bar. I don't know what's in the bar. So I'll ask my players, all right, tell me the 3 most interesting people in the bar and what they look like and what they're doing and what the person behind the bar is doing. So I'm kind of directing them a little bit, and if they're having trouble coming up with ideas or something like that, I will add some in myself, or I'll start to, let's say they've come up with 2 characters. So there's a dwarf sitting at the bar kicking his feet because he's on a bar stool and his feet don't touch even the rung to rest your feet on, and he has like 12 tankards of ale in front of him, all of them empty, and he's just starting to stack them and ask for more with a big red beard. Okay, we got our first character. Then we have a group of 3 elves sitting off to one side. They appear to be discussing business, and they get annoyed and look annoyed every time that the dwarf at the bar breaks into song, and between them they have like 3 tankards of ale that look like they've barely been touched at this point. And there's like some peanuts sitting in a bowl in between all of them that they've barely touched, and they tend, every once in a while, one of them will like look and consider it and then decide it looks too dirty. So let's say the players have given me 2 things like that, and they're having trouble coming up with a third. Then as the DM, I would start to prompt them for information by starting to fill in some of that information myself. I'd be like, okay, well, the last person of interest, they're sitting off in a corner by themselves with a cloak up covering their face. What do you notice about a person like that? Like, oh, well, you can see like they have a bow sitting behind them after further into the corner. They seem to primarily be watching the group of elves to see what's going on. And you can start to build that way and really start to flesh out that world together. And I completely forgot the point I was making with that, but oh, I remember it now. So that's one way to keep the amount of effort ahead of time from being so high, is you can generate content on the fly, both you and as the dungeon master, and or you as the players to help out the dungeon master. Now that style of DMing, dungeon mastering, is not for everyone. I like doing it quite well, but for some people, they want to plan out more. They want to know a whole lot more about what is going on. They don't want as many surprises. There are a couple of ways you can do that, but both are going to require more time. The first is you can run modules. So Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, they put out, I believe it's 2, maybe 3 different story adventures every year that you can pick up. So like if I go back to the marketplace, none of these adventures. Can even get Rick and Morty. So Descent into Avernus, Curse of Strahd. Some of these are small adventures, some of these are big adventures, but there's a ton of different ones. This is actually you can just buy a box with created characters, the monsters you need, the information for the adventure for Amazon probably has it for $15, maybe 20. And that's all you need to play D&D. Could simply be that. But yeah, there is a time commitment, and there is a commitment to your group that I think is part of D&D that is overlooked. Not by everyone, but by some people. When playing D&D, and when playing semi-regularly, so twice a month, once a month, whatever it may be, there's a lot of chances for people not to make it. But also very few chances for people not to make it. Because if you miss one session, you potentially haven't played for 2 months. And that's a long time away from a story. And so there's one of the pieces of D&D that I think can be overlooked is that time commitment. I'm trying to think if there are any other overlooked pieces. I think there are a few more, but yeah, let's talk about a few more things that D&D is not. So D&D is really meant to be this very wide open storytelling game where you fail and you succeed. So right there are 2 of the things that people tend to forget or not realize. And it's from both the DM side and the player side. For the player side especially, there's the idea of that you kind of get from some video game RPGs where if you don't win a fight, you can just fight it again. And again, and again, and again, and again. Load that last save point. Or, well, I want to steal this thing from the whatever character. Oh, they caught me? Alright, I reloaded the last save point. The consequences don't exist nearly as much for failing. And in D&D, a lot of the time, you're rolling a 20-sided die to see if you succeed at something. That means you could roll a 1, followed by another 1, followed by another 1, followed by another 1, and you're looking for high numbers. So you could fail a lot. And that's part of the storytelling nature. That's part of working together as a group to be able to figure out the way past those bad rolls. But it's a trap to think that, okay, well, we're adventurers, we're heroes, we're going to be better than the average bear. No. you might just be really unlucky one night and have everything go against you. And then I think the other thing that both players and the DM can often fall into is Dungeons and Dragons is really an open world sort of game. When I ask players, okay, what do you want to do? They can literally say anything. They can be like, well, we've gotten a whole bunch of gold, so I want to go see if I can buy a farm. Cool. That's something they can do. Now, it's not going to progress the story, but it's something they can do if they want to. In video game RPGs, which a lot of people are familiar with as well, you can't go and buy a random farm. That's not programmed into what the game can do. The game has a clear path. Even if you can do stuff like out of order, there's still a general path that you have to follow. Dungeons and Dragons is not like that. If you know where the final boss is, you can go skip everything else and go straight to him. You will die, but you can skip everything else and go straight to him. That's not something you can do in a video game, or generally in a video game. I'm sure there are some that you can do that, you will still die. So that's one side of it. And the other side is, for the DM, for players, often they can get stuck into this mindset of like, okay, everything that's going to be coming at me is going to match where I'm at. And it's going to, I can hop around from story thing to story thing, and the DM will eventually make it all work together. No, not necessarily. There's a chance you're going to just wander into an area that you're not supposed to go for 15 levels. Just get creamed if you try and fight it. The DM isn't necessarily, or should not be trying to kill you. But if you go somewhere in the world that you know is that you've been told is extremely dangerous, it turns out to be extremely dangerous, it's not a video game. And for the DM, it's not a video game because their story, progressing from A to B to C to D to E to F, is not a straight line. It's so the term in Dungeons and Dragons is it's not a railroad track. It's not railroading the players into a certain story. It doesn't just go right along its straight, perfect little track. It's going to go crazy places. You're going to have to adjust on the fly, even if you've thought you planned for everything. And you can't just take away options from players because you need them to go to a certain spot at a certain time. Otherwise, the story falls apart. And I think railroading is one of those things that we'll come back to. That will be a topic for another time in more depth, because there are times when people push railroading so far in the other direction so that the players can literally do anything, that it's as worthless and bad a game as if everything was perfectly timed out on its little track. But that's its own story, own show. Let me quickly check how long we've been going here. Somewhere. Lost it. Been live for almost 40 minutes. We'll continue a little bit longer, because I've talked so much about story at this point. I've talked about how the players can contribute to story, how the DM contributes to story, But the biggest way that you can contribute to story as a player is this second tab right here. Creating a character. Forge your legend, as it says. Yeah, you choose a race, choose a class, determine your ability scores, describe your character, choose equipment, come together, gain levels. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, you get to forge your legend. That's actually a really fun way to put it. You can be any sort of character you want to be. Now, there are pitfalls with that too. I actually have written a series of articles on nerdologist.com about character creation and kind of the different levels of character creation. Because I'm going to talk about the main pitfall. Two pitfalls. Everybody wants to be that... Not everybody. A lot of people have a character, that idea that they have, that is this loner character, this lone wolf, off on their own. Doesn't work in D&D, not unless you're playing a game with only one character in it, plus the DM. Because you're part of a party, and if you keep going off and doing your own thing, you're stealing the spotlight from everybody else, and people are going to not have fun at the table. The other pitfall to avoid is being Batman. By Batman, I mean some character who is somehow quite good at everything. In D&D, there are a lot of different skills. And you can build a character. There are ways to build characters so they will be the best at every skill. But when you do that, again, they might be perfectly happy being in the party and have a reason to be in the party. But when you can sneak better than the rogue, heal better than the cleric, and whatever else, and are stronger than the fighter, you're now stepping on the toes of everybody else's fun again. So when you create a character, make sure you're creating a character that fits into the game you're playing, into the world you're playing, and has a reason to be part of the story you're telling. Because it's a group effort, and everybody's characters need to work together. So yeah, there's choosing the race, choosing the class, determining ability scores, and everything else, but creating that background for your character, creating the reason why your character is there, that's really where the meat of creating a character comes in. And finally, there's playing the game. And continue the adventure. It's probably going to sell us something. I don't know what it is. I haven't clicked on these links yet. But yeah, creating the character can be one of the most fun and rewarding parts of the game, as you get that group of characters together, and especially with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, you can play whatever group of characters you want to play. They recommend that you have a fighter, a rogue, a wizard, and a cleric. Why? You have your tank, you have your DPS, you have your area of effect, and you have your healer. There's no reason to have that in 5th edition D&D. They recommend it, but they fully know that they've built a system that you don't have to have that. And as a DM, I have to know what sort of group you have, but I can tailor the adventure and the story that I'm telling with you to the characters that you have. And then finally, it really is playing the game. Just sitting down at the table and playing the game. In the Monster Manual and the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, there are a lot of rules as to how you're supposed to play the game. You don't have to follow any of them, and you can still have a fun time at the table. Like I said, they give you framework as to how to tell your story, but whatever rules you don't use, you don't use, or you misuse in your game, and I'm borrowing this from the RPG Academy, if you're having fun, you're doing it right. If everybody at the table is having a good time, from the DM to all the players, you're doing it right. That's how you play D&D, is having fun at the table. And in the end, you really can't ask for more than that. You can't ask for D&D to be anything more than sitting at your table with your friends, having a good time. And there are certainly many things that people can do to have a good time, to have fun, but D&D is a really unique experience. It's a really fun time telling stories together and creating worlds and memories that will last a long time, lifetime. There are plenty of things you can do, but it's worth it, in my opinion, to carve out time, if you're interested, to play some D&D, to roll up a character, to sit behind that DM screen, and I'll explain what that is later, and tell a story together, create memories together, laugh, get excited, get mad at the dice, and just have a blast sitting at the table playing the game. I feel like I'm getting more nostalgic over this than I should be. I'm not a person who has played anything besides 5th edition D&D. I haven't played since the beginning. That would be kind of weird if I had. I would have been very young. Probably negative years. Forget when it started. But it has created a lot of great times, and there have been a lot of silly moments in the games of D&D that I've played as a character, for one-shots at cons, or the campaigns that I've run for Dungeons and Dragons when that was a podcast. And yeah, like I said, I'm creating these videos because I know somebody who is looking to start in D&D, and I want to encourage people to start. It's not about knowing everything and being perfect at all the rules before you start, to have that perfect character, that perfect story for them, those perfect die rolls. No, it's about the complete mess of a story that you're going to tell, and that it's going to be a blast when you do it. And that's what good D&D is. That's what fun D&D is. As long as everyone is having fun at the table while you're doing that, it is going to be a great time. And you're going to have memories, and you're going to want other people to play D&D. And it might be you don't have a blast at the table. Maybe RPGs aren't your thing. That's fine too. There are so many hobbies and so many things out there that, yeah, have a blast with whatever you love. And if you're interested in D&D and you want to give it a try, do it, and I'm sure you can have a blast with that too. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what Dungeons and Dragons is. I went all over the place with that, from what you need for Dungeons and Dragons to storytelling to a little bit of character creation and character creation theory. But if I were to sum it up, yeah, it's that collaborative storytelling around a table with friends where everyone is having a great time. That's D&D. At the core of it, that's what D&D is about. So I just want to thank you for watching. I hope that there's some good stuff to glean out of this. When I have a tighter topic, I'll probably be a little less rambly than I was today, a little less nostalgic sounding than I was today. But yeah, it's fun to talk about D&D, and as I get a better setup, hopefully I can start doing some Q&As on D&D to get some specific questions answered that people might have for what makes good D&D. So I just want to thank you for watching. I'm going to go back to the crazy screen here now, but I'm excited to do more of these, so see you next time. Bottoms up.